very pleased to welcome State Representative Dan Branch back to the University of Texas at Austin. As most of you know, Representative Branch served as the chairman of the House Committee on Higher Education during the 81st Legislature and is a member of the Legislative Budget Board. He is widely recognized as one of the legislature's leaders in higher education. And in the last session, he was the author of House Bill 51, known as the Tier 1 Universities Bill. This created a network of programs and funds to encourage the development of more research universities in Texas. This is an unprecedented commitment of funds for university teaching and research in the state. Speaker Branch was a guest in the Texas Politics Speaker Series in 2009. This is hard for me to believe. It seems like 6 months ago. It'd be impossible to ignore the fact that he returns to campus at a time of significant budget cuts to higher education. While committee assignments for the 82nd legislature have yet to be announced, everyone expects Representative Branch to continue to be a key player in the very difficult discussions about the future of higher education and higher education funding in Texas as the legislature grapples with the current budgetary shortfalls. Thus, it is with great interest and pleasure and interest in his insight into the challenges before the legislature that we welcome Representative Dan Branch back to the University of Texas at Austin.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim. Thank you. Thanks, Dean. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dean, and thank you all for having me. And Jim, I appreciate this series and the great work that you do and the whole Texas Politics Project. So thank you. And I really want to thank President Powers for you honor me by being here. I know you've got to run off to your own set of remarks, but I know we've spoken by, you guys won't believe this, by text, and that's probably old-fashioned now. I don't think we've tweeted recently, but we did text each other when the big news about the Longhorn Network took place, and so we're communicating cyberly, right? And so I'm really impressed with, in a time when resources are really limited, that your university has sort of been a leader in alchemy, which is the art of creating new sources of funding. And so from nowhere, but of course we knew the value was always there, with ESPN have created this new source of $300 million worth of revenue, and brilliantly added both academic and the arts and athletics, all weaved it all together, and so I think a model transaction for the country. So congratulations, and it's fun to be here with all of your team, so many, Nancy and Gwen, and our resident wizard of higher education policy who took care of us so well last weekend. So many of your folks here add value to those of us in the legislature. Thank you for being here. My team's here, Candace Woodruff, who's my chief of staff, and we have some of our UT interns. I think one of your class members, Jim, Sarah Daniel, is here. She's helping us in the higher ed policy, so she's actually crafting policy while she finishes her degree here, and then Justin Stein's working in our office, and and really in the mix in terms of helping us edit and write and communicate our message out. So it's a full effort. I'd like to get my son over there at some point, Charles Branch, who's here as a freshman. So thank you for being here, Charles. The beard looks like it's progressing. And so we're fully invested. We have, Stacy and I have 3 students here at UT. And so assuming everyone stays on track and there's no victory laps, then we'll only have 2 next year. But so we're looking forward to Spencer's graduation in the spring, and I saw Catherine on the way in, so I'm happy to be here, Dean, and happy to have some of our most important family assets in your care here. So with all that ado, let me get underway and let's talk politics, one of my favorite subjects. And again, I know, Mr. President, you've got to leave, and Nancy, thank you for taking such good care of President Powers. All right. All right, now we can talk turkey now that the boss is. Well, I wanted to visit with you today a little bit about what's going on just south of here, and what we affectionately call the Pink Building, just south of here, the Texas Capitol. And and hopefully get your impressions, which are always really important to us because, you know, a lot of people say, well, how you doing? I say, well, I don't know how I'm doing. As a politician, you don't know how you're doing unless you tell me how I'm doing. So I look forward to getting your perceptions of things. And for us, and one of the first rules of politics, since we're talking about Texas politics, is perception is reality. So it's real important to know what the perception is, and if we need to educate or change the misperceptions, then we try to do that. But I know this is shocking to you. Sometimes perception and reality are not precisely in line. So your perceptions help drive policy, and so it would be important. See if we're working here. So we're going to try and cover a lot of subjects quickly, and someone will keep me on track time-wise, so we do leave some time for Q&A. Do not let me filibuster. But we'll talk a little bit about, just to give you a historical frame, and I know a lot of you are up on the subject, but I think it's really important that you understand a little bit about our constitutional paradigm and how limited we are as a limited government state, and how that affects the tensions we're dealing with this week when we're trying to craft a budget in a period of revenue shortfalls. And then some highlights. We won't dwell long on last session. A lot of those are known and talked about. We'll run through those. Talk a little bit about coming issues in higher education and broader in the 82nd session, and then some of the challenges, why I'm energized about higher education in Texas and the challenges we face, and why it's so important. It's so important that you all prepare yourselves and ultimately pick up the gauntlet for solving these issues. And one of the most important things you can do is complete, meaning get your credential. Not only get educated, but then make sure you grab a credential and don't take too many victory laps as you go around the course. This is the ledge, and this week we celebrated, I guess, 129 years ago. It's amazing how quick the current building, the Capitol we're in, we laid the cornerstone this week, 129 years ago. This is really important. You've got to understand that we work off a Constitution based in the Reconstruction period, and because we seceded and were part of the Confederacy, and then felt the crippling effects of that both during the war and then afterwards. The reaction to that, once we came out once we re-entered the Union, and once we came out from under military rule, was that the populace, in a spirited debate in 1875, said we're going to ultimately approve a Constitution in the following year that really decentralized power and put more power in people and less power in Austin. And so you got to have a fundamental appreciation of that to realize when you go down to the Capitol, there's only certain things you can do because our Constitution limits us. Even though it's been amended many times, as we all know, it has some parameters that limit us. And some examples, of course, are that we're a citizen legislature. So you got to understand that. Often the media tries to put, state government, federal government sort of next to each other, and we are a citizen legislature. I'm expected to have a real job. Charles wants to spend more on a ski trip than I get in $600 a month. And so our expectation of having citizen legislatures that come down every other year, not every year, only 4 states now still have a biennial legislature. We write a 2-year budget. If someone in Austin wants a number to sound big, they give you the 2-year number. Of course, everyone else thinks in terms of 1 year. If they want it to sound smaller, like they're spending less, they might just give you the fiscal year number. So you got to always ask, the first question is this a biennial number or a fiscal year number? When you're talking numbers in state government, that's not an issue in the federal government because we always never even can write one budget. We just, it just goes on and on and on, and we pass the October 1 new year, and then we sign a continuing resolution sometimes in January or February, and just agree to everything and with additional spending. So it's a much different model, and so you have conflicts. I can have a State Farm insurance person on the insurance committee, and so he knows a lot about insurance, but he might have a conflict, he might have a bias. Whereas in the federal government, a congressman or senator, their only source of income, earned income, is from the federal government, and therefore they're fully in, and they're not a citizen with a livelihood that brings issues to the table. We also spend a little bit more on those folks than you do in Texas. There's also time limitations. We have a very short session, unlike the Congress that can go on and take long recesses, but then always keep coming back for more, and over a 2-year period until the Congress actually ends, as it did this year. We have 140 days by Constitution. And so you'll hear people around here say, you know, X number of days till sine die, the Latin term without days. I mean, at some point, I think this year it's May 30. May 30th is our last day. And on May 30th, if we're not done with our work, the Constitution forces your legislature to disperse. And the only way we can come back, we don't have the power in the Constitution to bring ourselves back, only the governor can bring us back at 30-day intervals. And then he sets the reason, the emergency, the reason why we would come back. Also, there's limitations on our veto override because a lot of times we don't get things done until late in the session, and so at that point there's not enough days left to come back and vote and override a veto, which actually cedes power to the executive, to the governor. Although traditionally, you know, most people think of Texas having a weak governorship. I kind of disagree with that, but that's what a lot of the textbooks, I don't know if the open source textbooks, which I'm glad you're using, would use, but anyway, a lot of people think of that largely because, again, remember this notion of the Reconstruction, they didn't trust a governor because they were under a military governor. They didn't trust him to pick his cabinet. They said, why don't we elect the ag commissioner? Why don't we elect railroad commissioners? Why don't we elect the attorney general, his lawyer, as opposed to him selecting it? And so ultimately in that discussion, they said, well, a governor ought to have at least one person who's got his back. And the debate sort of went something like this: okay, well, we'll give him the Secretary of State. And so he gets to pick the Secretary of State, but that's it. So he or she picks one person, the Secretary of State, and everyone else is elected. Over time, we've encroached on that. So now the Department of Insurance is not an elected commissioner, he's an appointed commissioner. And so you can, the TNRCC, TCEQ, our environmental agency, those are appointed as opposed to elected. So over time, we've encroached on this sort of so-called weak governorship model. And then you can see these are the ones that get a lot of attention, particularly at this time with our revenue shortfall. We have a lot of limits on our, we're basically a pay-as-you-go state. You can't spend, you can't bring on a lot of debt. And so we have limits on spending, we have limits on debt, and ultimately we have limits on taxation. We can't have a statewide property tax. We can only have local, what we have tend to be local school and other local taxes, so your county and your city and other local communities have taxation, but the state is prohibited from having a statewide property tax, which ultimately often comes up in some of the school finance debates that you all are probably familiar with.